Meanwhile, back in Washington, lawmakers are up to their old tricks, spending our money on nonsense, transgender animal tests, aborted fetal tissue research, and lab testing on beagles in China. These are real things the federal government has wasted your money on in the last year, your tax dollars. The waste, fraud, and abuse detailed in the latest edition of Republican Senator James Lankford's federal Fumbles report. And while the senator noted that President Trump's return to the Oval Office has improved efficiency and saved billions, he says the work to cut the fat from the federal government is far from over. Earlier, I sat down with Senator Lankford to break down the biggest federal fumbles on his radar. You have a new report called Federal Fumbles, which highlights millions, maybe even more, billions of dollars that taxpayers have worked hard for, that the government is wasting. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so this is our 9th edition. So literally 9 years, we've done the research in the background and said, here are practical ways that we can actually save money as federal taxpayers, and we can reduce spending. So this is not new for us and for our team. And we've had a lot of success to be able to cut billions of dollars in the past, but we're going to continue to be able to highlight it. It's thousands of dollars that were sent to a Chinese lab to do experiments on beagles, the dog. It was thousands of dollars that was spent to be able to research the effect of COVID on fish. It's $250 million that was spent on doing testing on mice, on transgender chemicals on them to try to make transgender mice. We spent $250 million on. So we're going through the different areas and saying, why is the federal tax dollars of all the things being spent on this, and what can we do to be able to reduce spending?
When you talk to the folks who are taking this money, like the NIH, for example, or the grants that were given out, because this was a process. Someone applied for these grants to get the approval to do these experiments. What is the response from the agencies, and what is their excuse to be giving out hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to experiments like you just explained?
Yeah, occasionally they say, well, there's a bigger research that we want to do long-term on something else, and I'll smile at them and say, how did it go? And they will often say, well, it wasn't successful. And we'll go, well, it probably wasn't successful from the start on it. It often is somebody in a certain university that they know the grant recipient on it, or they know the group, and so they're just funneling money to it. That's got to stop on it. And so we're trying to be able to push back. We've been able to get this done. I've had several folks that have gone through the confirmation process in the Senate, that when they've come to my office, they've said, one of my goals is to never be in your fumble book. It's like, that's a good goal.
That is a really good goal.
Because that means you're going to do oversight. Yeah. That's a good thing.
So this is the 9th version of it, which indicates to me that there's a lot more fraud that's happening, or at least wasted money in the federal government than we've been told about. In 2024, the Biden-led NIH funded $53 million worth of research using human fetal tissue obtained from elective abortions. There's millions of Americans all across the country who have very serious ethical problems with their taxpayer dollars going towards that. You call that an outdated practice. It's not scientifically necessary. So not only are we looking at taxpayer funds being used for nonsense, but also for things that violate the taxpayer conscience. So how are we rooting that out of the funding here?
So that's one of the areas that we try to be able to raise, and to say, okay, there's waste, there's fraud, there's abuse, but there's also regulatory abuse on it. And this is one of those areas where there's regulatory abuse there. We don't have to use fetal tissue from elective abortions to be able to do scientific research. A lot of the drug companies say, well, we've done it for years, and so we know what it is. But also the science is caught up to that. That is not necessary anymore, and it does violate the conscience of a lot of individuals to say, why are you using that tissue from an elective abortion to be able to say the drug that's there? The biggest waste of all was the government shutdown this year. People lose track of the fact we lost $78 billion as an economy for that 43-day shutdown that Democrats drug us through. $78 billion. That's a big issue for us. We're in another government shutdown now. Government shutdowns hurt us as an economy. They hurt us on the world stage, but they hurt us financially as well.
I want to get to the government shutdown in just a second, but when I talk to people outside of the Beltway who go to work every day, work really hard, they get their paycheck every 2 weeks, they see how much money has been taken out by the federal government. They look at reports like this and they're infuriated, but then people in town think that it's not a big deal. They say, oh, it's a few $1 billion here, $1 billion there. It doesn't really make a difference when it comes to the debt or the deficit or the budget. What is your reaction to people who say, oh, it's no big deal that they're wasting billions of dollars on these projects?
It's a big deal to every single American taxpayer, and you're exactly right. People that work hard at a convenience store or work hard in construction or doing whatever they're doing, when they pay taxes, that means their family is not getting that dollar. They expect that to go to national defense, to roads, to education. They want it to go to core things. People, as Americans especially, we're willing to be able to give our tax dollars to things that matter. We just don't want them wasted.
Yeah, we want the taxpayer money to be working for Americans, not against their interests or certainly violating their conscience.
Yeah, we don't want them to go to a Chinese lab so they can do experiments on puppies.
Yeah, we don't want that. Let's get back to the government shutdown. The Senate passed their part of the deal last week with funding. The House is now dealing with it. President Trump put out a statement on Truth Social saying that he wants the House to pass it as is. You've done your part, but you're watching the House negotiate over it. Do you feel the same way as the president in terms of the House members really just needing to get the show on the road with this partial government?
I do, actually. The White House and Chuck Schumer actually negotiated the deal that went through the Senate last week. Now, is this the deal that I would have done? No, it's not the first option the president would have done either. If you go back 2 weeks ago, Democrats were all on board, all 6 appropriation bills. All Democrats, House and Senate, were on board with everything. It had already passed the House with 80% of the vote in the House. This was a done deal when it was coming to the Senate. White House, House, Senate, everybody had signed off. And then Senate Democrats went crazy and said, no, we want a whole lot more. We want to reopen this. We understand it'll cause a government shutdown, but we want to renegotiate everything. So they went and negotiated with President Trump and his team. They came up with an agreement. We passed that in the Senate. And now there's a whole conversation with Republicans and Democrats in the House saying, let's reopen the whole thing and do it all over again. The president's like, enough. Yeah. We don't need to have government shutdowns. As I mentioned already, we lost $78 billion in the economy last time. It is a huge loss to the economy. Some people are just flipping and saying, it's not me, it's not my family. It does affect our economy. It does affect what actually happens in the country when we have a shutdown.
Yeah, and finally, I would just say that all of the waste that you pointed out, Democrats then come back and say they want tax hikes to spend it on things like this. So interesting. We'll be looking through the entire book of what you came up with. We appreciate you working on it, and thank you for coming in today.
Thanks.
Senator Lankford.
Yeah, glad to be able to do it. Good to see you as well.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.